It was late October when I decided to head deep into the national forest for a solo hunting trip. The season was just starting, and the woods were quiet except for the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of crows. I had been hunting for years and was no stranger to spending long nights alone in the wilderness. But this trip felt different from the moment I parked my truck at the old dirt road and walked in with my gear. The forest was vast and empty. No other cars, no other hunters, not even campers. The ranger station was over 15 miles back, and I hadn't seen a single soul on the trail. As I hiked deeper, I felt a strange stillness in the woods. The usual sounds of squirrels and small animals seemed muted, like the entire forest was holding its breath. I set up my small camp by a creek and planned to hunt at dusk. I had been tracking deer prints that led farther into the thick timber. As the sun dipped low, the forest became a maze of shadows. The sound of branches breaking echoed from the ridge above me. At first, I thought it might be a deer, but the crunching footsteps were too heavy, too deliberate. I froze, crouched with my rifle in hand, but nothing emerged from the trees. When night fell, the woods came alive in the worst way. The silence was broken by the sound of whistling, a slow, steady whistle like someone calling a dog, but the pattern was wrong. It wasn't playful. It was mocking. It carried through the forest, and each time it stopped, I could hear movement circling my camp twigs, snapping just beyond the reach of my firelight. I called out, thinking, maybe it was another hunter messing with me, but no voice answered, only the whistle again, from a different direction. Sleep was impossible that night. I sat by the fire, clutching my rifle, staring into the dark shapes of the trees. Around 3 in the morning, I heard heavy breathing, just outside the light. I raised my flashlight and caught a glimpse of something pale slipping behind a tree. It wasn't an animal. The shape was tall, thin, too long, limbed to be a person, but it moved upright, fast, and silently, except when it wanted me to hear it. By morning, I packed up my gear and decided to cut the trip short. The forest felt wrong, like it was pressing in on me. As I hiked back the trail I had marked with ribbons was gone. The branches I tied them to looked cut, not broken, as if someone or something had followed me and removed the markers. My compass spun aimlessly, the needle twitching back and forth. I knew the general direction, but every step deeper into the trees felt like I was walking into a trap. The whistling returned, faint at first, then closer. It was right behind me. I spun around and saw nothing but the trees shifting with the wind. I started moving faster, heart-pounding sweat, running cold even in the autumn chill. The sound of footsteps matched mine, heavier, longer strides. When I stopped, they stopped. When I ran, they ran. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt like it belonged to something that didn't want me there. I finally broke through the tree line hours later and spotted my truck still sitting on the dirt road, scratched up like something had dragged claws along the paint. I threw my gear in the back, started the engine, and didn't look back the entire drive out. To this day, I don't know what stalked me in those woods. Some say it could have been a person, someone living feral deep in the forest. Others think it was something older, a spirit or a creature not meant to be seen. All I know is I'll never hunt alone again. It was the middle of July when I agreed to join a couple of friends for a weekend trip in the mountains. They had found a small cabin for rent, just a few miles off a dirt road, hidden in the trees. The listing looked cozy, a rustic getaway. No internet, no phone service, just wood smoke and stars. I didn't think twice about it. I needed a break from the city. The drive out was easy, but the farther we went, the fewer houses we saw, until it was just endless pine forest and winding, muddy roads. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, something about it felt off. The place looked old, not in a charming way, but in a forgotten way. The wood was damp and warped, the windows fogged from the inside. It felt like no one had been there in years. That night, it started raining. Heavy at first, then pounding against the roof like fists. The power flickered and went out, leaving only the dim glow of the lantern we brought. The cabin creaked with every gust of wind. The three of us sat around the table playing cards, trying to laugh, but every so often we'd hear noises outside, footsteps squishing in the mud, slow, careful, dragging footsteps circling the cabin. We tried brushing it off. Maybe an animal. But the sound wasn't random. It was steady, like someone pacing back and forth right outside the door. My friend Mark finally grabbed his flashlight and yanked the door open. The beam cut through the rain, but there was nothing there. Just mud and puddles. We thought maybe we were hearing things until we noticed it. Footprints in the mud. Clear human footprints leading right up to the door and circling around the cabin multiple times, but they didn't lead away. It was as if whoever made them just disappeared into thin air. We tried sleeping, but the storm got worse. The wind howled, and the rain slammed the glass. Around 3 a.m, I woke to a tapping sound, not on the walls, not on the door, but on the window, right by my bed. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head slowly, and in the dim light I could just make out a pale face, pressed against the glass, staring in. The eyes were too wide, unblinking, just watching me. I screamed, and my friends bolted awake. But by the time they ran to my side, the window was empty again. The next morning, we decided to leave. But when we opened the door, the same footprints were back circling the cabin. Only this time they were fresh, as if someone had walked around us all night in the pouring rain. The mud was thick, but the prints were bone dry, not a drop of water filling them. We packed our bags and left without breakfast, none of us speaking until we were halfway down the mountain road. I looked back only once. The cabin sat quiet in the trees, the rain still falling, but in the upstairs window where none of us had ever gone, I saw the faint outline of a figure watching us leave. It was late October when I went deep into the northern woods for a weekend hunt. The kind of place where the trees grow so thick the light barely makes it to the ground. I had been hunting since I was a teenager, but this was my first time venturing so far off the grid. No cell service, no other camps for miles, just silence and pine. I set up camp near a narrow stream, pitched my tent, and built a small fire. The air smelled like wet leaves and smoke, and everything felt calm. But that night, as I sat listening to the fire crackle, I began to hear something else, a steady crunch of leaves, faint but deliberate. Someone was walking out there. I grabbed my rifle and called out, thinking maybe another hunter had wandered too close, but no voice answered. The sound stopped immediately, as if whoever was there was holding their breath. I stood frozen for a minute, then forced myself to laugh it off, telling myself it was just a deer. The next morning, I set out before sunrise, hiking deeper into the forest. The air was sharp and cold. My boots sank into wet ground as I tracked signs of deer. A few hours in, I stumbled across something strange nailed to a tree, a hunting knife rusted, but still sharp with dried stains. I thought maybe another hunter had forgotten it, until I noticed the bark beneath the blade had been stripped away in long, claw-like gashes, like someone had been hacking at it, over and over. By dusk, I returned to camp exhausted, but uneasy. The forest felt different, quieter, too quiet. No birds, no insects, just heavy silence. I lit another fire, cooked what little food I had, and tried to settle in. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps, but this time they didn't circle. They came closer and closer, until they stopped. Just a few feet outside the glow of the fire, I could see the faint outline of a man, tall, broad shoulders, standing perfectly still, watching. I raised my rifle and shouted, asking who he was. The figure didn't move, didn't answer. After what felt like hours, he turned slowly and disappeared back into the trees. I barely slept that night. Every crack of a twig jolted me awake. Around 3 a.m, I smelled smoke, but not from my fire. From somewhere else deeper in the woods. The smell of burning pine mixed with something foul like rot. I packed my gear before sunrise, too shaken to stay another night. On the hike back, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Deep in the mud along the path were boot prints, fresh ones, and they weren't mine. They had followed me all the way from camp back toward the main road, each step heavy, as though someone had been walking just far enough behind me to stay unseen. When I finally reached my truck and looked back at the tree line, I swore I could still see him standing there, just inside the shadows, motionless, watching.